This is National Hospital Week, the nation's largest single healthcare event. It's a celebration of the hope and the healing that's provided every day of the year by our healthcare professionals who support the well-being of their communities through dedication and true care from their heart. Given that we're all experiencing this year, a global pandemic that's having a profound effect on all of us in so many different ways, Hospital Week and all that it represents is more poignant than ever. I'm proud of how our community has been coming together each evening at 7 p.m. to honor, recognize, and thank our frontline workers in this crisis with cheers and by making some noise. This special week now offers us at the City of Portland the opportunity to put our thanks and our praise in writing in the form of an official proclamation. All week long, the Oregon Association of Hospitals and Health Systems is highlighting the fantastic work of Oregon hospitals. And we'd like to honor and recognize the sacrifice and the work that's being done in our Portland area hospitals. Because as you all know, hospitals are not just buildings. They're the healthcare workers inside of those buildings. We see their hard work, we see the risks that they're facing, and we see the time that they're sacrificing with their family and friends to care for all of us. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over to Becky Holpert. She is the president of the Oregon Hospitals Association. Becky, thank you for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Mayor. And thank you for giving me a chance to say just a few very brief words. National Hospital Week is typically a pretty big deal for our field. It's a time to recognize our community hospitals, health systems, and healthcare workers, and to honor our shared dedication to improving the lives of those we serve. This year, Hospital Week, as you noted, has taken on an added significance. COVID-19 has changed so much about all of our lives, how we work, go to school, how we socialize, even how we eat. But one thing that has not changed is this: our community hospitals are there for you when you need them, no matter the time of day, no matter your ability to pay. Hospitals will be there to provide compassionate care. COVID-19 is an insidious disease. It is easily transmittable. It spreads even when there are no signs of its presence, and it kills. There have been more than 3,300 cases of COVID-19 in Oregon. At least 130 people have died. More than half of the total cases and half of the total deaths have been here in the Portland metro area. Frontline caregivers in hospitals and health systems across the state have heroically responded to this pandemic and have shown tremendous dedication to keep Oregonians safe and healthy. I want to thank them all today. I also want to thank Mayor Wheeler for his strong leadership and clear-minded approach to addressing this crisis. Mayor, your actions to promote strong social distancing guidelines helped bend the curve, preserve vital hospital capacity, and save lives. We know this pandemic is not over, and as we continue to fight COVID-19, hospitals will need this council, public health agencies, the state legislature, the governor, and Congress to partner with us. We're all in this together, and together we can overcome COVID-19. So with that, thank you for this proclamation. Thank you, Mayor, for your early action on social distancing, and thank you for giving me the chance to say a few words.
Thank you, Becky. We sure appreciate your being here, and it's fortuitous that we're celebrating for the Portland Hospital Week today, but really we should be thankful not just for the work that everybody does in the hospitals during the pandemic. We should be grateful for the good work you do year-round under ordinary circumstances. So thank you for that. Colleagues, before I read the proclamation, does anybody have anything they'd like to add? I see Commissioner Hardesty has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Becky. Becky, I just wanted to add my admiration and appreciation to hospitals all across the state of Oregon for really being mindful of and thoughtful on addressing the COVID-19. As Mayor Wheeler said, it's not just about COVID-19, it's each and every time we need a hospital, hospitals' doors tend to be open. And we are grateful for the community partnership that we have. So thank you and happy Hospital Week.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Of course, I have opened up my wrong document. Here we go. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Becky Holtberg, and the Hospital Association. Recognizing hospitals for the work you do to keep all of us healthy is more critical than ever. I want to thank every hospital healthcare worker in Portland and across our country. Your efforts are essential and so appreciated. My family has benefited from many dedicated and compassionate healthcare workers who've supported us at Dornbecker Children's Hospital and Randall Children's Hospital over the past 19 years, providing not just life-saving care to my son, but comfort to my family in some of our most difficult hours. You and your families are in my thoughts as we face this ongoing public health crisis. Every hospital healthcare worker, from nurses to administrators to maintenance staff, are putting themselves at greater risk every day to deliver care to COVID-19 patients. They're isolating themselves from their loved ones to treat our loved ones, and they all deserve our gratitude for this work. I want to encourage every Portlander to thank the healthcare workers in their lives during this week of recognition. In my neighborhood at 7 o'clock every night, we hear that appreciation, drums and bells. We heard it last night at our budget listening session, actually, which was a sweet moment. Whether with words, cards, meals, or showing your support for their work by donating blood if you're able, and of course, by staying home and taking every recommended precaution to keep healthcare workers safe and our hospitals at a manageable capacity. So thank you again to all of you.
Thank you, Commissioner Udaley. Commissioner Fritz.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Becky, for being here. Last week was National Nurses Week, and State Representative Rob Noce was kind enough to remember that I used to be a nurse and sent me greetings about that. So I've been thinking about you all a lot, obviously with the crisis, but knowing from having worked in hospitals for 27 years that every day, it's not just during a crisis, that people go to work courageously, knowing that they are going to be dealing with people who are ill, who may be combative, who might make them sick or hurt. And yet they do it every single day. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. I also need to thank the folks at Portland Adventist Hospital for saving my life in January. And I'm sure each one of us could thank somebody in a hospital for the great work that you do. And it's Mayor Wheeler, I very much appreciate you bringing this pre-gavel proclamation, because we don't have enough opportunities to say thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Well said. And now it's my pleasure, on behalf of the Portland City Council, and by extension, all of us here in the city of Portland who are grateful to your work, to read a proclamation. Whereas public health is critical to sustaining and improving the state, and whereas a hallmark of Oregon's public health network is the extensive collaboration amongst its hospitals and health systems, and whereas frontline caregivers in hospitals and health systems throughout the state rapidly responded to the COVID-19 global pandemic and have shown great resilience in the face of an emerging public health threat while working tirelessly and selflessly to keep Oregonians safe and healthy. And whereas Oregon Hospital Week celebrates those who improve the health of their communities through compassionate patient care. And whereas Oregon's hospitals provided more than $1.5 billion in community benefits to the state in 2018. And whereas Oregon's 62 hospitals supported nearly 138,000 jobs, generating nearly $20.9 billion in total economic output in 2017. And whereas Oregon's hospitals are a top employer in many of Oregon's communities. And whereas Oregon's hospitals are dedicated to providing quality care, education, and leadership to their residents and visitors. And whereas National Hospital Week is an opportunity to thank all of the dedicated individuals within our hospitals and health systems for their outstanding contributions. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, the mayor of the city of Portland, Oregon, the city of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 10th through 16th, 2020, to be Portland Hospital Week in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this week. Thank you, Becky, on behalf of all of your affiliates. Thank you for the great work you do, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we are now in session. This is the Wednesday, May 13th, 2020 session of the Portland City Council. Good morning, Carla. Please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor. Hardesty,
Here.
Udaley,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by phone, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your continued patience, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. We will now hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum.
Thank you, Mayor. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Finally, please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate that very much. First up, Carla's communications, item 352.
Request of Luvila Morello to address council regarding Zenith I'm sorry, she is not speaking.
All right, very good. 353, the next individual, please.
Request of Hung Yao to address council regarding city's response to the economic crisis from COVID-19.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Hyung Nam. I served on the Police Budget Advisory Committee this past year, and I want to just add a few comments in addition to my comments at the budget hearing yesterday. I believe that especially the police back that I was part of, but also the entire budget process is in violation of local budget law, Chapter 294 of the Oregon Revised Statutes. My experience specifically, well, in general, I think this process this year is being rushed with only one public hearing before City Council approves a budget. But also in terms of participating in the back, I was actually the only member of the back that attended every single meeting last year. And then at the end, before we actually saw the document for the Police Bureau budget request, we were pressured with 1 day's notice to meet as the back committee and write our back report. And that schedule didn't work. And I also expressed that I wasn't comfortable doing that without seeing the details of the budget request. And basically it seemed like we were being pressured to rubber stamp this report. And since then, actually seeing the report, I'm really surprised by many things in it. First of all, one of the things I pointed out when I was on the committee was that they changed the categorizations of the program offers. So for example, if you look on pages 13 and 14 of the police budget request, it's like comparing apples and oranges. You have totally different categories from last year and this year's, and there's no way you could compare how the budgets are changing. In addition, I noticed one thing that I would have never seen, and I'm sure the other back members didn't see when they wrote their report, because this entire request did not exist then, is that the section on the I forget, it's a tactical team. Basically, it's calling for 7 additional FTE for SWAT, the Special Emergency Reaction Team. And I have no idea why that's being called for. But anyway, I just want to point out that the website for not only this back, but the other backs were not updated. In fact, there were vacancies on many backs that were not published. Minutes were not published as well. And this whole process has not been accountable and transparent. And finally, I just want to say that, you know, with so much of the general funds going to police in this time of crisis, that's probably going to last for a couple years at least. I think we really need to look at some serious cuts to the police budget. So in addition to not adding those 7 additional FTE to the SWAT team, we should cut the rebranded Gang Enforcement Task Force or team, that's the Gun Violence Reduction Team. We should also cut transit police and cut PS3 personnel. This crisis gives us a chance to carefully review our priorities and values. Making these changes would help the city save money and provide more services in these difficult times, and will be much more in line with the values and the mission of the city. Its austerity undermines public safety. And as I said in my testimony yesterday, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Daly, you have your hand raised.
I think Commissioner Daly and Fritz's hands were still raised from the last one, but I just put mine back up.
Got it. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Yang, for your testimony. I just had a question about how long you've served on the back for Portland Police Bureau.
Since the first meeting in September, until the last meeting, I forget if that was in the last regular meeting was either December or January. And then there was an additional special meeting for writing the back report. And that's the only meeting I missed. But most of the other meetings, I can't remember. I mean, you can't even see it because minutes are not even published for every meeting. But for many of the meetings, the other back members didn't show up. There were vacancies on the back that were never filled. I was the only member of the back that showed up to every meeting.
I want to thank you for your service to the city of Portland and ask you to feel free to reach out to my office. I don't know if your testimony is written, but I would, and if you got through it all, but I would certainly like to have you follow up with my office on your experience. And let me just say that I think this budget season is extremely unique. And there are some things that are happening at glacier speed that all of us would be in opposition to under normal circumstances. And so I think some of it is us adjusting to this new current reality. But some of what you're saying to me are systems challenges that not just for the Police Bureau's Budget Advisory Committee, but many other advisory committees. And we can do a better job of actually onboarding people on all of those committees, as well as supporting them so that they feel like they are investing their time wisely. So thank you again for your service, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Next individual, item 354, please, Carla.
Request of John Murphy to address council regarding resetting budget process to include alternative revenue streams, multi-year approach.
Good morning.
Good morning. First off, I want to say I completely agree with the sentiments towards the hospitals and the nurses, the people that are helping us through this virus. I appreciate your time and effort to make that statement. My name is John Murphy. I am a member of the Portland Metro People's Coalition, which is a coalition of 20 organizations working to build a socially and economically egalitarian society. Recently, like Hyung Nam, I have been privileged to participate in the Office of Management and Finance meetings as a representative of the PMPC. It's been a great opportunity to participate in the local government process. And it's about this type of participation and decision-making that affects our community's future that I want to talk about this morning. We are in the midst of the budget process, and I want us to keep in mind the words of President Kennedy, who wrote these words 67 years ago. Poverty in the midst of plenty should not go unchallenged. Wealth and power concentrate in the hands of the few, as many struggle to survive while their lives are living below minimum levels of health, housing, food, and education. Much has changed across the nation in the decades that have passed since JFK wrote those words, but sadly, the gap between the haves and the have-nots has only widened. Now is the time to act to correct those inadequacies. With this budget crisis, a perfect storm is staring us straight in the collective face. The release of the city budget while struggling to recover from the economic calamity of coronavirus. We have tough choices to make as a community. Repeat the patterns of the past or steer a new course that reflects the progressive, innovative spirit of Portland. Community-based groups like the Portland Metro People's Coalition will not support repeating mistakes of the past. Our 20+ coalition partners demand a reimagining of the possibilities and building new roads to a better Portland. Recent past austerity budgets in Portland resulted in drastic cuts for many social services for the working class, with promises of more cuts to come. Even in booming economic times, the city of Portland has prioritized budget cuts to vital city services and programs. Shockingly, national leaders have actually proposed the idea of letting states and cities go bankrupt to shed debt and bad decisions of the past. This horrific suggestion is a standout example of the old world resolution to new world challenges. We will not stand for these short-sighted, cruel, and unjust solutions. We need a Portland vision for the New Deal, like the New Deal, to emerge from these times stronger and more just for all of Portland's residents. This crisis presents a once-in-a-lifetime generation opportunity to come together as a community, to reimagine how old policies can be restructured and innovative fixes implemented that will help bring in an era of social and economic justice. Recent huge victories for the Portland Clean Energy Fund and honest elections in the city and county have provided momentum for us to build on. We can use this opportunity to transform our annual budget cycle into a multi-year budget plan, employing new progressive tax structures to fund initiatives that will provide what we desire for our society.
Time is up.
Pardon me?
Your time is up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. We appreciate your participation this morning and sharing your thoughts. The next individual, Carla, item number 355, please.
Request of Diana Goodman to address council regarding Being Green performance.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Council. Can you hear us and see us all right?
Loud and clear, Diana. You're good to go.
All right, cool. Hello, thank you so much for having us. My name is Diana Gutman, and this is my husband. And I would like to first take a moment to acknowledge and honor the host people of these lands, the Tlaxcani, the Kalalapuya, the Chinook, and the Clackamas. Today, my husband and I will be performing Being Green, famously sung by Kermit the Frog, as a way to say thank you to all of our healthcare workers who are providing to our community, to everyone who is feeling the impacts of the COVID-19. And I just want to encourage everyone today that times are difficult, but we are going to get through this. We're not in this alone. We're in this together. It's not that easy. What?
I'm sorry. I was going to say it sounded like you had a soundtrack, but it was on purpose.
No, it's my husband. Can you not see us?
We can't see you. No, you are. You should enable your video.
How do I do that? I'm so sorry. I've never done this before.
If you go down to the left-hand corner of your computer and just.
I'm on my cell phone.
Okay, we need somebody more technically advanced than I to help with that one.
So sorry.
Diana, we can hear you though. Go ahead and play
Okay,
the song. We'll listen.
Okay, all right. It's not that easy being green, having to spend each day the color of the leaves. And when I think it could be nicer being red or yellow or gold, or something much more colorful like that. It's not that easy being green. Seems you tend to blend in with so many other ordinary things. And people pass you over because you're not standing out like flashy sparkles in the water or stars in the sky. But green is the color of spring, and green can be cool and friendly light, and green can be big like an ocean, or important like a mountain, or tall like a tree. If green is all there is to be, it can make you wonder why, but why wonder? Why wonder? I'm green, and that'll do fine. In fact, I think it's beautiful, and it's what I'd like to be.
Bravo, that was beautiful.
Bravo, bravo.
What a great way to start the day. Thank you both. That was beautiful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council, and thank you to all of our healthcare workers. What you do is very important to our community, and we wouldn't be able to get through this crisis without you. So thank you very much.
Right on. Thank you very much. Carla, next up is the consent agenda. I'd like to refer item 358 back to my office. It's my understanding item 360 has also been pulled by Mr. Handelman. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
Have any other items been pulled off the consent agenda?
We've had no other requests.
Please call the roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Udaly,
Aye.
Fritz,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. Colleagues, just a bit of housekeeping before we move into the next portion of the budget. Carla, I would like to request that items 369, 370, and 371 from the regular agenda be moved to the Thursday afternoon agenda to be heard after the 2 p.m. time certain. This is being done having had what I believe are productive conversations with the leaders of the bargaining units that are referred to in these three particular ordinances. So if we could make that move, please. So Thursday afternoon agenda after the 2 p.m. time certain.
And Mayor, could I just interject here, please?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Fritz.
I just wanted everybody to know that the 2 o'clock time certain is probably going to go at least a couple of hours. There are 47 people signed up to testify, and there'll be a presentation before it. So if people are just wondering how soon after 2 o'clock they should sign on for the other items you just moved, just to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. The next item will be item number 356. Carla, if you could read 356, the time certain at 9:45.
Adopt the fiscal year 2019-20 spring supplemental budget and make other budget-related changes.
Colleagues, before us, we have the spring supplemental budget, also known as the spring bump. We discussed my proposed spring bump at the work session last week. Due to the unprecedented emergency brought about by the COVID-19 virus, I issued guidance to delay the spring budget monitoring process or bump by several weeks and streamline the requirements to focus on some of the following adjustments: technical true-ups, required compensation set-aside allocations to end the year on balance, program carryovers that either one, assist in supporting current mayoral and council priority packages for fiscal year 2021, or two, ensuring the continuity of core services and operations through fiscal year 2021, or third and finally, contribute to the city's fund to address urgent emergency response needs. I indicated that no new requests for general fund resources would be entertained except for requests for resources required to continue core existing operations through fiscal year 2019-2020. This morning, the budget director, Jessica Kennard, who's with us, obviously, will walk us through the current ordinance. We'll then hear and second amendments to the ordinance. After that, we will provide opportunity for public testimony before final deliberations and voting. I'll now turn this over to Director Kennard to review the spring bump ordinance. Good morning, Director Kennard.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, members of council. For the record, Jessica Kennard, City Budget Director. I am once again going to pull up a brief presentation for the benefit of folks at home, and just as a quick reminder of the spring supplemental budget process. I'm here with Jane Marie Ford, our principal analyst and spring bump and all bumps coordinator. Today, we are going to be briefly going through the bump process. We're going to provide a brief overview of the mayor's proposed spring bump, and then we're going to have a discussion on of amendments before voting. So as a reminder, the spring bump is the second out of 3 budget monitoring processes that we complete each year. The primary purpose is to provide year-end financial projections, make current year budget adjustments, and true up costs between years. That we typically entertain are truing up beginning fund balance based on the comprehensive annual financial report, interagency adjustments, program carryovers from one fiscal year to the next, compensation set-aside allocations, and the allocation of contingency resources, both in the general fund as well as in non-general fund. And then, of course, other technical adjustments as well. As the mayor mentioned, this year we had, he issued some new guidance in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis. And this included a request for new requests for general fund only to include those that are required to address continuity of operations in the current year. And carryover requests should be limited to those things that the mayor mentioned should assist in supporting current mayor and council priority packages, ensure the continuity of core services, and contribute to the city's fund to address urgent response needs. As the mayor mentioned, last week during the work session, we walked through line by line what was in the changes to the general fund at a high level. The compensation set aside requests that are included in the mayor's proposed bump includes $8.3 million in compensation set aside, and this funds all of the requests for compensation set aside from police, fire, parks, and the Office of Equity and Human Rights. New general fund requests that are included in the mayor's proposed bump total $1.4 million. This primarily funds the park's revenue gap associated with the COVID-19 closures of their recreational facilities. In terms of program carryover, the requests that are included total $5.9 million. These are 14 requests in 8 bureaus. And then finally, there are a handful of returns to the general fund included, totaling $3.7 million. All told, with the mayor's proposed spring bump, general fund contingency would stand at $30.4 million. This retains just over $2 million in unrestricted contingency for any unanticipated current year needs, $5.9 million in program carryover for continued services that will be budgeted as part of next year's budget process and voted on as part of the approved budget next week. And then there's $22.4 million in policy set aside for 2021. The majority of those resources are going towards funding our funding gap. So a small handful of those things are actually still in policy set aside for specific things for next year, including Portland street response, overhead true-up costs, and a couple of other small items. But the majority of those funds, again, are funds that we are taking to help fund our $75 million funding gap. So now I would like to turn it over to see if if there's any questions about the items that are included in the mayor's proposed bump as filed. And then if there are no questions, we can turn it over for discussion of amendments.
Colleagues, any questions thus far? I'm not seeing anything. Director Kennard, go ahead.
So our office is aware of a small handful of amendments. I believe, Mayor, you have a couple of amendments that you were considering offering, and I believe Commissioner Hardesty might have an amendment that she would like to offer. I have a list of things that I have heard about. I'm happy to walk through those, or I can turn it over, Mayor, to you to offer the amendments that you have.
I can go ahead and offer it up, and you can provide commentary as necessary. So what we'll do right now, colleagues, is we'll hear and if appropriate, second amendments. I have a list of amendments as Jessica just mentioned. They've been gathered by the City Budget Office. I'll read them first, then I'll open the floor to any additional amendments that any of my colleagues may have. We will read each proposed amendment, and then we'll seek a second in turn. And then after the amendments have been placed on the table for discussion, we'll of course open it up to public testimony. So I have 4 that I would like to enter potentially for the record, assuming there are seconds to be had. The first is a motion to make the following adjustments to the supplemental budget as proposed. I will read the language and then I'll give a slightly lengthy but important descriptor. The official language is decrease the Bureau program expenses and special appropriations general fund for the Office of Youth Violence Prevention by $231,000 to be carried over into fiscal year 2021 for significant vital operations. This includes $77,000 for the Healing Hurt People program, $77,000 for the Gang Impacted Family Coordinator, and $77,000 for other programming. That includes We Are the Caution campaign, ceasefire implementation, the Restoration Academy, and funding to culturally specific organizations. Update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change. And if you'll bear with me just for a moment, since I know this is an important issue, I'd like to dig just a little deeper on this particular amendment.
Could I second it? Let me second it so you can put it on the table for discussion.
So the formal language has been put on the table. Commissioner Fritz has seconded. It's on the table. Here's a slightly more detailed narrative. In Portland, gun-related violence to date in 2020 has significantly increased over the number of incidents reported in 2019, an upwards trend being experienced by other United States cities as well. This is exactly why OYVP is requesting the ability to utilize existing unexpended grant funding to expand service to persons at the highest risk of victimization due to gun-related violence. The cause for unexpected funding was created due to vacancies that have been difficult to fill. The resources and help that they need keep growing. For example, here are the needs. A position for their program, which is titled Healing Hurt People. This person works with Trauma One hospital shooting victims and their families to reduce gun violence during the 4-hour window of retaliation. The Healing Hurt People position, which serves shooting victims in the ER, is not currently funded. However, the NGO who carries the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding for the HHP program, has allowed the employee to assume the HPP role as a volunteer, and moving forward without any funding, they will not be able to continue to allow this function to exist. Unfortunately, based on the number of shootings, which is 188, the need for services within different Trauma One hospitals, we can no longer afford this program to function as a purely volunteer program. This funding will support the Healing Hurt People program, HHPP, through the amending of the Gang Impacted Family Team Coordinator Grant Program contract. Please note that the HHPP is currently receiving only in-kind support and has no direct funding. There's also a need to keep critical programs going. Amongst them, we are the Caution Campaign, which is community-based, the Ceasefire Implementation, the Restoration Academy, and current contractual obligations with NGOs to make sure that OYVP can successfully implement gun reduction strategies, complete the necessary community outreach, and fulfill the various contractual obligations we have with our culturally specific NGOs. I would encourage my colleagues to strongly consider support of OYVP and the hard work they're doing to help families impacted by gun violence. The next, and that has been seconded, so it's on the table. The next is a motion to make the following adjustments to the supplemental budget as proposed. This would decrease Bureau, this is the formal language, decrease Bureau program expenses and increase interfund cash transfers in the Bureau of Emergency Communications Fund by $133,244. These resources will be transferred to general fund policy set aside for the Portland Street Response and Nurse Triage Program in fiscal year 2021. This would update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change. And just very briefly, as you'll recall.
Would you like a second, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Second.
So the motion has been seconded by Commissioner Hardesty. It's on the table. You'll recall last year we allocated $500,000 to the Street Response Fund. That $500,000 has not yet been expended for the pilot. It's been carried over through the proposed budget into fiscal year 2021. There was a discussion about adding the nurse triage component of this program. We are taking $133,000 in carryover from the Bureau of Emergency Communications for the Street Response Program, specifically the nurse triage program. So this is carryover that would be proposed for this. It has been seconded. The third, a motion to make the following adjustments to the supplemental budget is proposed. Decrease Bureau expenses in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability General Fund by $146,000 and set aside funds in the General Fund contingency for program carryover and reallocation in the fiscal year 2021 budget for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Equity Program work. This updates Exhibit 1 through 5 as necessary to reflect this change. Again, this is based on the discussion we had in our recent work session. This would be carrying over underspending in the Bureau from the current fiscal year. This will allow us to make a critical hire and speed up the work. And there was broad interest in the work session to accelerate this work. The allocation of this carryover would allow us to do that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fritz seconds. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Last and not least, a motion to make the following adjustments to the supplemental budget is proposed. Decrease the Bureau program expenses in the Portland Parks and Recreation General Fund by $83,000 and set aside funds in General Fund contingency for program carryover and reallocation in the fiscal year 2021 budget for the purchase of new fleet vehicles. This would update exhibits 1 through 5 as necessary, as needed to reflect this change. This is basically a technical amendment. Director Kennard, is there anything else you want to add?
Second.
We have a second. I guess you don't need to add it at this point. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. That completes my proposed amendments. I believe there are others who have proposed amendments.
Sorry, I was looking for my raise hand thingy and couldn't find it. I'd like to make a motion to make the following adjustment to the supplemental budget as proposed. Decrease Bureau program expenses in the Office of Community and Civic Life Recreation Cannabis Tax Fund by $548,094 for the 2020 Cannabis Social Equity Grants. Resources will be reallocated in the Prosper Portland Recreational Cannabis Tax Fund budget in fiscal year 2021 for 2021 community grants. Update exhibit 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change. Is there a second?
I'll second it for the purposes of discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Should I make the case for this amendment now?
If you'd like, sure. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. I appreciate the hard work of the Office of Community and Civic Life and the community committee that came together to review grant applications. But I am operating in a different arena than we operated in post-pandemic. And what we are attempting to do today is to get as many resources into the hands of community members who are in desperate need of those resources. As I reviewed some of the potential recipients of this particular grant, I asked myself, is this better in an organization's hands, or is it better in the hands of people who need to buy food, who need to try to keep their businesses open, who need to try to take care of their families? So this is not meant to be to disregard the fine work of the committee. But quite frankly, these dollars need to be out of the door now. And I know that Prosper has a process to be able to get these dollars out as quickly as possible. So I'm done. Questions?
Colleagues, any questions? Commissioner Daly?
I don't believe you can make this amendment because it affects 1920 funds and it's can't be part of the spring bump conversation. So if I could get someone's opinion on that, that'd be great.
Director Kennard?
Yeah, sure. So this is, the spring bump is making amendments to the current year to 1920 allocation. So it is possible to make that change. I understand that there is another item, I believe, on council's agenda today related to these funds that is probably more the issue is the relationship with the other item that's being heard by council later today.
I'm sorry, you lost me on that. That was a little bit, it was too cryptic for my brain. Can you be a little more
So I believe that there is an item in front of council today that allocates the grants from Civic Life, these cannabis fund grants to community members. And so this would be amending this, if this action were taken by council right now, it would require that additionally that item not pass because the money would be allocated to Prosper instead.
So just to be clear, we have made the decision about who to issue the social equity grants to. All of these organizations are doing vital work in the community. And while direct assistance is also important, so is the work that these dollars are funding. And I absolutely oppose completely derailing this process and reallocating these funds.
Any further discussion on this item? Commissioner Hardesty, given the vehemence of the commissioner in charge, I'll tell you this makes me feel uneasy. There hasn't. I find myself in agreement that getting the funds out quickly is critically important right now, and I appreciate your sentiment in that regard. But it feels like there needs to be more discussion on this particular item from my perspective.
I'm happy to withdraw this amendment, but I expect that we must have a real conversation about how we're utilizing cannabis funds before we approve any additional allocation of those funds. So I will pull it if I have that commitment from my colleagues that we're going to have an open, honest conversation about how we invest these dollars. Just because we thought we were going to do something in January, we are living in a different world at the moment, and we have to be open to thinking differently and outside of the box that we're accustomed to thinking in. And so I am happy to withdraw my motion, but we need to make sure we have this conversation before we make any commitments about where those dollars go.
Commissioner Fritz, I see you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, well, we are going to have that conversation. We've got an item on the agenda today, and we're going to discuss it in the main budget next week. So I'm a little puzzled, but I appreciate you withdrawing the amendment.
Yeah, it's 3:73 this afternoon. That's a time certain at 3:30, right? 3:30. So yeah, good. And I know that the cannabis fund allocation generated a lot of really good conversation when we had our work session. Was that just yesterday? When was that?
I'm not remembering. I think it may have been yesterday morning, yes. We will be having conversations, but the conversations that are scheduled to happen are after the fact. That is not the kind of conversation I want to have about immediate needs in our community and who should be making those decisions. And so all of us have budgets that we are trying to flex so that we can be supportive of community members. But this can't be a pro forma activity. Yes, Commissioner Fritz, we will have the conversation, but we have to be clear about where we're headed. And I just feel that, you know, I keep being told, oh, but we've already made these decisions about how these funds go. We are in a different world. And if we're not going to acknowledge that we're in a different world, then this is an exercise in just status quo funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner, for withdrawing the amendment. I want to assure you that these grants were evaluated in light of the COVID crisis. And I'm also perplexed by some of your comments because this grant program isn't even being funded next year. So yes, there are important conversations to be had, but it won't be about Civic Life's grant program because it won't exist next year.
Thank you, Commissioner Udaley. Sorry, I'm struggling with the technology this morning. Good. Okay, so that has been withdrawn. Commissioner Hardesty, did you have a second amendment you wanted to propose or no?
No, Mayor, I believe that was the only amendment that I should have moved forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good conversation. Commissioner Udaley has an amendment. Nope, nope. Okay, does that, colleagues, complete amendments or discussion on amendments before moving to public testimony? I see no hands raised. Of course, you can always raise issues later in this conversation. With that, we'll move to public testimony. Carla, do we have people ready to go?
No one signed up for this item, Mayor.
All right, very good. Then before we vote on each of the amendments, is there any further discussion on said amendments? Hearing none, Carla, could you?
Sorry, Mayor. I did have a couple of concerns about the Office of Youth Violence Prevention and these two particular programs.
Sure.
And so I hope we can talk a little bit about that particular amendment.
Sure.
My understanding from the City Council presentation was there was one person who was grant funded for the Healing Hope People program. The grant ran out, and now that person is a volunteer. I am very concerned that we are once again setting ourselves up for a grant-funded community activity. The grant money goes away. We're going to now fund it one time, and there's going to be an expectation that we continue to fund a program that, in my opinion, is desperately needed. However, one person does not a program make. And so is there someone that could give us more information about why we would fund a program that was grant funded? And in fact, the anticipation will be that we will continue to fund this as an ongoing effort. I actually don't know enough about the Office of Youth Violence Prevention to know whether or not this is a good investment. I did have an opportunity to talk to Jamal. I think it wasn't last night, it was the night before. And so this is the first opportunity I've had to hear about both ceasefire, which very much concerns me. That ceasefire program has been a failure all across the country. And so I am concerned that we are committing to programmatic activity that we've had no information on prior to. So that's how I feel about that particular amendment. I'm not sure whether it's a good investment of our limited resources based on what the council presentation was the last time we talked about Healing Hope People.
Okay. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. I just had a question. There was an article in the Oregonian yesterday about the Portland Street response being indefinitely postponed. So I just wanted to ask about the carryover for that money and why we would not allocate it in the fall bump instead.
Oh, okay. And just before we get to that, I want to close the loop with Commissioner Hardesty. Director Green is attempting to log on. And so I'm deliberately stalling a little bit, and then we will come back to your questions regarding the Office of Youth Violence Prevention. Director Kennard, correct me if I am wrong. I saw the same article and I was also confused. The $500,000 that we allocated as a council for the pilot has been carried over in the proposed budget. And if we support the amendment that I have put on the table, which would be the second amendment that I put on the table, that would also be using resources for the nurse triage program. Specifically, that would be using.
So Mayor, I can help you with that. Part of that is paying for the evaluation as well as the creation of the nurse triage.
Yeah, and that's carried.
Okay.
But the question Commissioner Fritz asked was, has the program been indefinitely delayed? I don't believe it has.
I don't know. The answer to that question is no. I have not read the same article that Commissioner Fritz has read. But clearly, our plan had been to start the pilot this month, in fact. Clearly, we can't start the pilot because people are on stay-at-home orders. But it is our desire and expectation that as soon as we are not ordered to stay at home, that process will continue on. And it has continued on. It's continued through our union negotiations, which had to be put in place. The Bureau of Emergency Communication has to do some new training, which again has been delayed because of COVID-19. But there is absolutely nothing that I have no indications that we won't be full steam ahead as soon as this current pandemic crisis is over.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Fritz has her hand up again, and then I want Director Kennard to chime in if it's helpful.
Thank you very much. That's helpful clarification, Commissioner Hardesty. I just thought that some folks at home might be wondering that question. To be clear, I think the nurse triage is an essential component of the Portland Street response. And so I definitely support, if the whole package is moving forward, doing that. But I still, so I guess what I just heard you say, Commissioner Hardesty, is that it might start at the beginning of the fiscal year. And so you need the money now. That's correct? She's nodding for those at home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Director Kennard.
Yeah, I'll just add from a technical standpoint. So what we're doing today is we're taking money out of the current year's budget to make it so it's available for spending in next year's budget. But today's action is just taking the money out of the current year budget. The question as to where it goes and how it's available on July 1 will be taken up as part of the approved budget next week. So if there's a desire for that money to be ready to go out the door on July 1, we'll want to make sure that at next week we offer an amendment to actually budget those funds in specific bureaus' budgets. Right now, that $500,000 is in a contingency account waiting for appropriation. So if we know where we want that money to go and we want it to be available to go out the door July 1st, next week, we'll want to make that amendment to put that in a bureau's budget.
That may have been the source of the confusion. I can sort of see that from a layman's perspective as to why somebody might look at that and say that the resources have been put somewhere else. So I understand that confusion, but that's clearly not the case based on the testimony that we're hearing today, that the program has been delayed, certainly not indefinitely. Good. All right. I'm still stalling. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the vote, and I'm going to exclude OYVP for the moment so we can get to, we can have Director Nike Green come on board. So let's see, we will start with my amendment 2. This was the one with regard to the Bureau of Emergency Communications that we just discussed. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Sorry, aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The motion passes. The third motion was regarding the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to continue to fund the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Equity Program work. Any further discussion on this item? Carla, please call the roll on the amendment.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
I very much appreciate the discussions that have happened between the Office of Equity and Human Rights and the Planning Bureau, and particularly want to thank Director Andrea Durbin and all of her staff for their commitment to equity and to working in a collaborative manner citywide. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The motion carries. The fourth motion was regarding the Portland Parks and Recreation General Fund budget. This was set aside funds in the general fund contingency for program carryover and reallocation related to fleet. Any further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the motion carries. And now, using the miracle of low technology, Bureau Director, the head of the Office of Youth Violence Prevention, Nike Green, is on a cell phone sitting on my laptop, hopefully able to communicate with all of you. Nike, are you there?
I am.
And Commissioner Hardesty, can you hear Nike?
I can hear Nike. Good morning, Nike.
Very good. We just MacGyvered this. All right. So Commissioner Hardesty had some questions for the director. If you could quickly restate the question, Commissioner Hardesty.
I'm happy to, Mayor. Good morning, Nike. As the mayor presented your proposal, I had a question about Healing Hurt People. When we last heard about that program at the City Council, it was a grant-funded program. And my understanding is that this amendment is asking us to fund one individual that would then go to different hospitals to support the family after a shooting has taken place. I am very concerned that once again, the city of Portland will be put in a position of funding something one time temporarily, and then we will be asked over and over again to refund this. The grants went away. What is the strategy? The last time that gentleman spoke at City Hall, in fact, they were about to hire a second person. I am very concerned that one person is not going to be able to do the job that we are setting up. So if you could tell me what your plan is around Healing Hurt People, I would be very appreciative.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for your question. So as far as Healing Hurt People is concerned, the history behind that is the original came from Cascadia Behavioral Health, who carried the MOU and provided the funding for that program. When they came to the end of their budget, then CGO picked up the MOU and they allowed, without funding, they allowed our current individual, who is our Healing Hurt People person, to continually operate and provide the services, but his role is currently unfunded as Healing Hurt People, although the service is being provided. So previous to COVID-19 and all the different things, yes, we definitely have already trained a second individual who currently also is in a different role at that capacity and is not funded. And so as we were wanting to continue to carry that work over, that is what the request is and ask for. Now, in regards to your question for moving forward, I agree with you. We don't want to continue to have roles and positions and services built on a yearly request of funding. So we are currently looking for outside funding and different grant organizations. So in the future that we can accommodate 2 to 3 year funding for that FTE. Because what I've learned since I've been in the office is that just obviously in any program, you don't want to fund things on a yearly basis. So number one, it is not currently funded, but it is currently operating. And that's what we're asking for that position. That would allow us the time to solidify external funding and grant foundations to then continue to uphold that program.
Thank you very much, Nike, for that response. My second question had to do with ceasefire, which has been a colossal failure all across the country. I am very concerned that we are taking on a national model that consistently has had negative impacts on Black and Brown communities. And I guess for me, Nike, I appreciate I got an email from you yesterday, which was the first time that I had heard from you. It would be really helpful for us to have a briefing about what that office does and what the vision is for the future. So if you could say a little bit about this ceasefire effort that you want to start, where does that come from and why would we invest in that?
So the components that we're discussing in the amendment that's on the floor as far as ceasefire are evidence-based practices in which we're talking about the Restorative Academy, making sure that we provide prevention and intervention services for those that are most impacted to be victims or offenders. In regard to the larger conversation around ceasefire, I think right now we're all in the same position of investing our efforts and our research and our data gathering on what would a combined collective effort with a multi-pronged approach around gun violence reduction look like, and whether that is completely a ceasefire Portland model or it's just our gun violence reduction strategy, that is continually in regard to our conversation. So I would love to sit down and have that thorough conversation with you. As stated, within the interruption of COVID-19 and the challenges faced, and we had to reallocate our priorities and our efforts. And so I think there's more forthcoming in what a combined citywide strategy will look like. And I would love to continue in that dialogue with you.
As would I, Nike. I really appreciate you making yourself available and answering these questions today. I know this is it's all challenging for all of us operating a bit differently. I am going to support the mayor's proposal today, but it is a conditional support that I'm going to provide. I'm going to expect that I'm going to know a lot more about this when we have this conversation in the fall bump process, because I'm going to assume that we've had a chance to really think through what the next steps are and then how we can be helpful in developing programs that keep our community members safe. So thank you so much. I appreciate your willingness to jump on and be center stage for a minute to answer some of these questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Commissioner Hardesty, for your questions and your support at this time. I apologize for the digital divide out here in North Portland. I have 5 devices and we finally figured out one that could work. So thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And before Nike hangs up, does anybody else have any questions for Director Green? Very good. All right. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Troubleshooting. I love it. All right, Carla, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Hardesty.
Again, thank you, Mayor, for moving this around so that I had a chance to get a couple of my questions answered. I look forward to learning more about the potential of the work that the Office of Youth Violence Prevention is doing. I vote aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the motion carries. And thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I enjoyed the conversation and I appreciate the manner in which you supported the motion today. And we should have these conversations. We have the opportunity over the course of the summer to do that. I think we should all have a collective understanding of what the program is going to do and how it's going to work. I want to make sure that as we move forward, the council feels completely comfortable with the strategy that we're pursuing. With that, Carla, this brings us to the main motion with the amendments as already approved. Is there any further discussion to the main motion? Carla, please call the roll to adopt the supplemental budget ordinance as amended.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Well, this is my 12th spring supplemental bump. In 2009, we had the Great Recession, and in 2013, we had a $25 million gap. And neither of those challenges compare with the sudden collapse of revenue that we're experiencing right now with COVID. In addition to the economic challenges, we've had to be mindful that merely being out of our homes increases everyone's risk of contracting a potentially deadly disease. And so I greatly appreciate Jessica Kennard in the City Budget Office and also Mayor Wheeler for your nimble attention to all of the things that are changing almost on a daily basis, never mind almost on a daily basis. And I think this is a very wise and practical approach to addressing many of the problems, and I am glad to support it and vote aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The supplemental budget ordinance as amended is adopted. Thank you, Director Kennard. Again, thanks to your entire team. Thanks to the folks on my team, particularly Kristen Dennis, who worked so hard on this. Thank you, colleagues, for your refinements and your collaboration on this. Good work, everybody. The next item is to the regular agenda, item 366, please, Carla.
Proclaim May 2020 to be Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Colleagues, part of what makes Portland the great city that it are the many cultures that are woven throughout our community. They add diversity, vibrance, and important perspectives. As a city, we must continue to recognize and celebrate the many historical and cultural contributions made by all cultures to our great community. Today and all during the month of May, we're celebrating the more than 45,000 community members who trace their roots to Asia and the Pacific Islands. The Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, who I'll refer to as our AAPI neighbors, help make the city of Portland better by bringing their diversity, their rich cultures, their traditions, their religions, and of course, their amazing cuisines to our community. We also acknowledge and understand that this pandemic is having a disproportionately negative effect on our AAPI community. They were amongst the very first to experience the economic fallout from the COVID-19 crisis, even before we were all ordered to stay home. Furthermore, they've seen a rise in hate crimes and speech against them due to this pandemic. As a city, we must continue to be committed to seeking solutions to the problems our AAPI neighbors are experiencing. Now, more than ever, there's a need for unity amongst all Portlanders. Let's all come together to support our local AAPI businesses and organizations and lend them encouragement during these trying times. As a city, we are committed to serving the needs and the interests of the AAPI community. Before I read the proclamation, we will hear from Dr. Allison Prasad and Mala Ali Ali. Welcome.
Good morning, namaste, and bula, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners Hardesty Udaley, Fritz, and colleagues. My name is Dr. Allison Prasad, and I'm the People and Culture Analyst within the Bureau of Human Resources. In addition, I serve on the Leadership Committee for the Hapa, Asian, and Pacific Islanders Deep Affinity Group at the City of Portland. Before I begin, I would like to thank Jamal, Mustafa, Khan, Tim, Eileen, and Joseph from Mayor Ted Wheeler's office for their time, energy, and assistance with today's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month proclamation event. We are Portland. This month, we honor the history, culture, tradition, and contributions of AAPI community members, both locally and nationally. As a qualitative researcher, I believe in the power of storytelling, narratives, and oral histories. Today, I'd like to share my story with you. I am the great-granddaughter of Girimityas, indentured laborers who were brought by the British from colonial India to the colony of the Fiji Islands. Tomorrow commemorates 141 years since the arrival of the first Indians to Fiji. My grandparents were farmers in Winindawa who did not know how to read or write. My parents are immigrants from the Fiji Islands who hoped for a better life. This is also where I was born and lived until I was 1 year old. When I was 2, I moved to Fiji to live with my grandparents and was reunited with my family in Canada when I was 3. At the age of 14, my family moved to Northeast Portland, where I attended Thomas Jefferson High School. I was a student in the health sciences, biotechnology, and dance programs. I was also an intern at Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center, a member of the National Honor Society, and a varsity cheerleader my junior and senior year. I went on to receive multiple college scholarships, including the Dean's and Diversity Building Scholarship to the University of Oregon, where I graduated Phi Beta Kappa with a BA in Ethnic Studies. As an undergraduate student, I was also involved in various local and national student organizations. I also became a student activist and lobbied in Salem, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. on issues concerning underserved and historically marginalized communities. I continued my education and received an MA in Educational Policy and Leadership, Diversity Studies, and a PhD in Multicultural and Equity Studies in Education from The Ohio State University. As a student, I worked for the Young Scholars Program, which is a pre-collegiate and collegiate pipeline program between Ohio State and 9 urban school districts across the state of Ohio for first-generation college students. After receiving my doctorate, I followed my heart and passion for sports and received my first seat at the table with Major League Baseball. From the ballpark to the boardroom, this was truly my field of dreams. My journey continued on to the Oregon Museum of Science and History, where I conducted research and evaluation to create access and opportunities for diverse populations through STEM education. I also wrote a technical manual for NASA, a reminder that your dreams should be out of this world. I then became a public servant here at the City of Portland. I've served as the city's affirmative action aide and have had the opportunity as an engagement specialist and people and culture analyst to conduct research and stakeholder engagement on behalf of each of your offices, including that of the late Commissioner Nick Fish. My research findings have also led to the development of core values for the City of Portland. Currently, I also serve on the board of directors for Cascadia Behavioral Healthcare and the Portland Workforce Alliance. As I reflect on my life and journey, I will continue to carry the spirit of my ancestors within my mind, body, heart, and soul. As I conclude, I would like to express my gratitude to each of you for your leadership, service, and himmat, which is the Hindi word for courage during these unprecedented times. My hope is that as a city, nation, we continue to demonstrate love, care, compassion, solidarity, justice, and humanity towards one another. Thank you, Dhanyawad, and Banaka.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Talofalava Malolale. I am Manamalo Ala Ilima. I am also known as Malo for short, and I use all pronouns. I do want to also be mindful that I have another community member by the name of Virginia Luca. Much of our work together in volunteerism is intertwined, and she's Palauan, so she could speak for herself after I speak.
Very good.
I want to thank you, Mayor Wheeler, and also the City Council Commissioners for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Pacific Islander community with regard to Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, especially during a time where COVID-19 is impacting us not only health-wise, but economically. And it's really interesting, you know, as a community member, just watching the dynamics involved for our elected officials and our staff preparing budgets. And so I'm grateful for Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Udaley and Commissioner Fritz and you yourself, Mayor, for just having that thoughtful conversation, things that Hardesty had brought up. You know, I'm feeling in my heart like, yeah, why can't we think differently outside the box? And then you have this proclamation about, you know, how we can be celebratory. So I do want to point out that with Prosper Oregon, even before COVID-19 had impacted the Portland area, that they had partnered with Apano to provide financial assistance to many of our Asian-owned businesses in the downtown Chinatown, as well as the Jade District. So I just want to be mindful of that. And we're very grateful for stepping in during a time where discrimination was on the high and a lot of people were not being patrons to any of these businesses. But I also want to talk about the narrative of what's happening to the Pacific Islander community right now. Yesterday, the Oregon Health Authority published a data report, and with that, I believe there's like 79,000 tests that have gone out and performed. And of that number, 3,358 people tested positive, and we have about 130 deaths. For Pacific Islanders, we have the highest rate of infection at 19.6 per 10,000. We have 33 confirmed cases, of which a majority of those cases come in the Portland area within Multnomah County. We've also have 9 hospitalizations and 1 death. So our Pacific Islander community, when we heard the first news back during the week of April 20th, we formed the Oregon Pacific Islander COVID-19 Emergency Response. And we're all volunteering our talents, our skill sets, our resources, in which Utopia PDX, which I am a board member of, has dedicated $10,000 for the seed money to help many of our Pacific Islander individuals and families to get tested, to help them think about that process, because there's a trust factor that's missing right there. And it's helping them transition, helping them get used to the idea that if we don't know your status, we don't know how to take care of this issue, we don't know how to stop the spread of COVID-19. And it's just coming from a lens of cultural humility, cultural responsiveness, and cultural responsibility. And this is not an ask, but it's just something that I want for you to understand, that we have people from the Chuukese community, people from the Palauan community, people from the Marshallese community, people from the Yapese community, as well as Pingalapese, Tongan, Samoan, and Native Hawaiian community banding together in response to this emergency. And we realize this is happening with many Black, Indigenous, people of color communities as well. And so for me, it's more than just celebrating, who we are and what we've contributed. It's really who we are in response to what's happening now, that I think those narratives need to be captured. And at this time, I'd like to share the floor with Virginia Luca. Virginia?
Good morning, Virginia. Thanks, Mela.
Thank you so much, Malo, for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Virginia Luca. I use she and they pronouns. Thank you so much, Mayor Wheeler and the City Council Commissioners for the API Heritage Month proclamation, as well as for having me today. I want to greet us all in the Indigenous languages, our Pacific Islander communities that live in Portland: Ali, Hafade, Tirau, Ranaanim, Yahweh, Mukadin, Talofalava, Aloha, and Malo Elele. My mother is Palauan from the island of Ngayaur, from the clan Oragiblai, and my father is white. He was born and raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin with French-Canadian heritage. He joined the Navy during the Vietnam War, and eventually he sailed to my mother's island of Palau, where he met my mom. I was born in Palau, and I was raised on the island of Guam for 25 years before moving to Oregon 17 years ago. Currently, I have a role of a Pacific Islander researcher and community organizer. I sit on the board of APANO, and thank you again, Mayor Wheeler and Prosper Portland, for all the funding that you provided us to help with the businesses in the Jade District, as well as Old Town Chinatown. I also sit on the board of Living Islands and serve as the program coordinator for Utopia PDX's Pacifica Leads program. Utopia PDX is the United Territories of Pacific Islanders Alliance Portland. We advocate for queer and trans-Pacific Islanders in our area. I'm also a member of Rangaligel Belao, a Palauan community organization that has been serving Oregon and Southwest Washington for over 30 years. And I'm here today with the hopes of highlighting what I've learned as a Pacific Islander researcher and community organizer. The experiences of our Pacific Islander community meets at the intersection of systemic oppression and as well as historical resiliency. And it's really important for us to share and embrace our Pacific Islander cultural ways of knowing, sharing our stories, lived experiences, and our ancestral history. All of that is also data. Data is not just numbers, it's also our lived experiences and stories. And any work that aims to serve our Pacific Islander community, it really must be centered on healing and reclaiming our identities, and it must be community-led from start to finish. I'd really like to advocate for the use of disaggregated demographic data collection methods, such as the Real D, which is race, ethnicity, language, and disability, as well as SOGI, the sexual orientation and gender identity. I would really love if we could have all of our government systems making use of these types of demographic data collection methods in order to ensure a more authentic and nuanced self-identification method in order to help us to notice and address our disparities. And finally, our Pacific Islander community recognizes that we really need a cultural resource center where we can gather, access resources for our needs, as well as especially host our cultural preservation classes and do things like celebrate our heritage. Kamral Masulang for your time. Thank you all for the amazing work that you're doing for our community, especially during this time of the pandemic. I really just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all.
And we'll open it up to my fellow commissioners before I read the proclamation. We'll start with Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for that incredible testimony. I actually had a question for Marlo, if I might. Marlo, you were talking about, I was not going to today during this proclamation bring up all the bad stuff that is going on, but you opened the door. And so I want to take an opportunity to help folks understand. Marlo, thank you for your appreciation of the early support of Jade and Chinatown businesses that was provided by the city and Prosper Portland. But I want to talk about what the real lived experience is in Asian Pacific Islanders communities over the last, let's say, 6 months, because even before we had our first coronavirus case in the United States of America, this racism had already come across the globe to target your community. And so I'd like to know what the current situation is and how we can actually get people the help they need if they're experiencing this racially discriminatory behavior and activity.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Hardesty. I've had talks with Con Tron, who's out of Mayor Wheeler's office, even long before, like, I think it was back in February, where folks were really hesitant about shopping at businesses or even be seen going to certain Asian-owned businesses or restaurants because of the backlash of an association with, the novel coronavirus where it originated from. And I feel that, that sort of carried over into COVID, the time of COVID, but it's impacting everyone just the same. But I have friends that are really scared to not go out by themselves if they do have to do a shopping run or a medication run. And so they're very vigilant and they're very mindful of the times that they go out and who they go out with, and notifying people, that during this time and this time, I plan to go here. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not back, in my place before then, text or call me, mm-hmm. just to make sure that I'm okay.
We're helping with those. So if someone in the Asian Pacific Islander community feels that they have been discriminated against, treated with racist insults, and et cetera, does your community know where to go to file complaints? Will they file complaints? And what vehicles have they been using for that complaint process?
So PUA's partnered with Apano very well with regard to this. Mm-hmm. So there is a form of reporting certain instances such as that. And I don't have the numbers, and I know that some of it is also anonymous. Well, we can't know exactly who's reporting it, but Apano's staff, is addressing it with PUA staff.
Wonderful.
So
one of the things that I know is that I read just this week that the Department of Justice had seen like a 400% increase in racially targeted activity, which shocked me because, they don't normally, they say they do, but they're not normally the place that people go to file those kind of complaints. And so when I heard that they had that many new cases, I just know that it's so pervasive across the city. So I'm going to go back to a more positive note because we are here about celebrating our Asian Pacific Islander heritage and culture. And so I wanted to go to Virginia, I believe, who was talking about how we would bring how we're looking forward to actually, once the pandemic is over, once we are rebuilding the kind of community that we want to have. Virginia had talked about gatherings of community members. Now, we know we can't do that now, but maybe Virginia could help whet our appetite for what we hope will come in the fall or maybe the winter of next year. Virginia, could you help give us some joy about where we're headed when this pandemic's over?
Yes, thank you so much, Commissioner Hardesty. Yes, for example, the Rangal Bela, we normally have a Palawan President's Day Festival every year around June. And that's not happening because we want to make sure to keep our friends and family safe. And so it is going to be postponed till next year. We have hundreds of people. Oh my gosh, Malo has been to these. We have like 800 people come, from California, Oregon, Washington to come and have Palawan food. We have Palawan music. We, normally either the Palawan president or the Palawan vice president actually comes all the way to Oregon, to Portland for that, because we have such a large community of Palawans here. I look forward to.
I met the president. I was at a restaurant and he was there having lunch, and I met him. He was here last year. So yes.
Yes. So I personally look forward to that because that's my community. But, as well as for Utopia PDX, we have so many celebrations during Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month for our queer and trans pop Pacific Islanders, who we call ourselves cutie pies for short. So, there's all sorts, the Polynesian population, they have their luau's. Portland State University has their annual luau. And our different populations, Melanesian, Micronesians, and Polynesians, we all have different ways we celebrate that have different meanings, but it's always together to say, hey, we made it another year. Let us, praise ourselves that we made it again, and to really have love for our community. And it's not just for our Pacific Islanders. We always have everyone come and please share with us. So thank you again for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, Malo. And I will just say, Virginia, you're absolutely right. I think one of the things our culture share is that was the first thing I was told. We're going to have lots of food. You should come. It's going to be great.
Let's eat.
I love this. And just to kind of wrap up what I wanted to say in this portion is I am so proud of the Asian Pacific Islander community in the Portland metro area, because even pre-pandemic, what I know is that we've always operated as a collective community, right? So it's not about who's in what position. It's about how do we collectively work as a community. And that's always brought me so much pride and so much appreciation. Watching Apano, let me just say, grow from an imagination in Joseph Lyon Santos' head and to the fabulous organization it is today brings me a lot of pride as well. And so just know we've got your back. We're going to be here. We're all in this together. And as soon as we can get together, we'll eat, have music, do lots of good, fun stuff. So thank you all for your time. And thank you, Mayor, for indulging me to get to where I needed to be for this proclamation. Thank you all.
Now, that was actually a great conversation. I loved it. And Virginia, you're right. I think the great intersect is, as you quoted it so eloquently, let's eat.
Let's eat, yeah.
Commissioner Fritz, you're up next, then Commissioner Daly.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Virginia and Marlo. On that note, I would have to say that one of the best meals I've had in the last 9 weeks has been from Thai Chili Jam, who is my favorite restaurant downtown, and who is happy. I was so excited when I found out they were delivering. So thank you for that. I also want to recognize that the Tongan celebration is probably not going to happen this year. That's been one of my favorite events over the time I've been on the council. I believe Oregon is the only state that has a statewide celebration, and we often have people coming from the Tongan Islands. So I will miss that, and I will look forward to going to it in the future. I want to also note that the Oregon State Department of Justice currently has a petition online for support for the Asian American Pacific Island and Pacific Islander community. You can find it by Googling Oregon Department of Justice, and the link is right at the top. And there's also a link there for reporting hate and bias crimes. And thanks to Tatiana Elihaldi in the Office of Equity and Human Rights for bringing that to my attention. Tatiana has also been working with the Human Rights Commission because we recognize that many immigrant communities are still deeply affected by events in their country of Oregon, and that there are many there's other horrendous things happening beyond COVID and the discrimination that people have had, and actually one of my staff has experienced biased speech more than once recently, and it's pitiful and heartbreaking and really sad. So we recognize that there are events in the Philippines, in particular, that the Portland Philippine X community has brought to the Human Rights Commission's attention, and that they will be striving to developing a response. So we need to recognize that the challenges continue. And so do the successes. So it's been wonderful to see Apano growing, as Commissioner Hardesty said. I hope you know that we are sorry, that I am sorry for the discrimination and hate that's been happening. And I am so glad that you are here and that you are part of the community, that you have your special communities, and that you are Portlanders. And so it's fitting that we are celebrating you today.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I had prepared remarks, but I really feel like they'd be redundant at this point. So I'm going to save everyone a few minutes and just say thank you to our guests for being here today, and how excited I am to celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I've really enjoyed working with communities across the city, from the Japanese Garden to Apano. I dearly miss all the restaurants I like to frequent in the Jade District, and I realized that there are about a dozen restaurants, Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Burmese, which is one of my favorites, that have been keeping me fed throughout this crisis. So I want to thank everyone, all the essential workers, for keeping us fed, among other things. We're going to be posting on Facebook throughout the month different ways you can learn about the stories, history, and culture of our various Asian American Pacific Islander communities, and encouraging the whole city to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Daly. And I want to thank Dr. Prasad and Malo and Virginia for your testimony this morning. This has been a fantastic discussion. It just underscores the deep significance of the AAPI community here in Portland. And we love the food, of course, let's eat, but it goes so much deeper than that in so many different directions, in so many ways. And I'm really grateful for the partnership that we have with Apano and the Jade District and other organizations to help really make this community thrive here as part of the broader community. So thank you for that. Thank you for the positivity. And I am proud of the fact that the city of Portland's very first recovery investments related to COVID did go to the Jade District. That's so critically important to our overall economy and to the community at large. And obviously it's critically important to the AAPI community. And I'm confident that those early dollars will quickly be expended and that we'll need to continue to support and uplift the community as well as the J District specifically. So thanks to all who worked so hard on this. So it's now my pleasure to read a proclamation on behalf of the City Council. Whereas Portland is home to more than 45,000 community members who trace their roots to the Pacific Islands in Asia, and whereas the Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, Southeast, South, and East Asian American communities are proud of their heritage and draw strength from their rich cultures and traditions. And whereas by bringing their diversity, rich cultures, traditions, and amazing cuisines, Portland is made much better by our AAPI neighbors. And whereas Portland's AAPI members come from diverse backgrounds, which include various languages, ethnicities, and faiths, including Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and Sikhism. And whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is an opportunity for all individuals and organizations to recognize AAPI contributions, development, and defense for our country, as well as the cultural, civic, and economic life of Portland for over 150 years. And whereas Portland, through dialogue with representatives from Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, continues to address the needs and concerns of its AAPI community and remains committed to seek solutions to problems they face, such as prejudice, discrimination, and violence, specifically during the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas Portlanders are encouraged to show solidarity with the AAPI community by supporting local businesses and organizations. And now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 2020 to be Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Portland. I call upon all Portlanders to recognize and celebrate the vibrant history, cultures, and contributions of our Pacific Islander and Asian American communities. Thank you, and thank you all for your participation today. Great discussion. Carla, the next item is item 367.
Authorize a contract with Landis and Landis Construction LLC for the construction of Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard Pipe Reconstruction Project number E10369 for an estimated cost of $2,900,000.
Colleagues, I'm pleased that in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, city employees are working hard to keep critical services going while minimizing the impacts to our community. This project is one great example of that. This ordinance authorizes environmental services to expedite a major sewer construction project in the Southeast Hawthorne Commercial District. Construction began this month while traffic is light in this ordinarily very busy area. It will allow BES to compress an 8-month schedule into just 3 months. The project will repair and construct nearly 3,000 feet of sewer pipe and infrastructure to address basement sewer backup risk, street flooding, and non-conforming sewers. Here to give a brief presentation are Joe Dvorak, who's our engineering manager, and Tressie Word, who's the senior engineer, both representing the Bureau of Environmental Services. Joe, I believe you're going to kick us off. Is that correct?
That's correct. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you bet. Loud and clear.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Good morning. For the record, my name is Joe Dvorak. I'm here on behalf of Bill Ryan, our chief engineer. This time I want to acknowledge all the hard work that Tressie Word and the project team did to have this project come together. We worked closely with our partners in PBOT, Portland Water Bureau, the community, and procurement services. So thank you, Tressie. At this point, I'll turn it over to her and she can talk a little bit about the project and then we'll answer any questions you may have at the end. Thanks.
Hi there, thanks, Joe. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. We can move on to slide number 2. I'm Tressie. Can everybody see and hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are here to talk about the Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard project, which is a part of a series of projects in the Alder Basin to address basement sewer backups that were identified in the 2012 Combined Sewer System Plan. This project also improves ADA accessibility. So specifically, this project replaces 2,900 feet of sewer mains, about 1,900 feet of laterals, sewer laterals, and 14 ADA ramps. And all of these assets are located either on or directly adjacent to Southeast Hawthorne. And go ahead and accelerate to the next slide. So this project, basically COVID-19, the pandemic has created some significant economic hardships for businesses on Southeast Hawthorne. And our team's been doing a lot of extensive public outreach in the community. And the Hawthorne Boulevard Business Association requested that our planned work be expedited to address some of these issues. So my amazing project team has come together. We've worked very closely with PBOT and the Water Bureau on this project. PBOT actually has a very high priority grind and pave scheduled for this area. Not this summer, but the coming summer that this gets ahead of. And also the Water Bureau agreed to work with us to highly accelerate the construction schedule to accommodate the Business Association request. Next slide, please. So as a result of the stay-at-home order, local businesses are closed, and there's less traffic occurring on the street. So therefore, PBOT agreed to allow extended construction hours, which basically reduces the length of construction from 8 months to 3 months, which is significant. And next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, our public involvement team has been a driving factor for accelerating this project. And our lead, our public involvement lead, Debbie Castleton's here to ask any question or to answer any questions that you may have regarding that matter in a moment here. Next slide, please. So this is an estimated construction amount of $2.9 million, and Joe's going to talk a little bit about the business inclusion and diversity elements for the project.
Great, thank you, Trustee.
Sure.
So as we see in this slide, the utilization amount identified by Landis & Landis is just over 25%, and you see the breakdown there. You know, while 25% exceeds the city's aspirational goals, we certainly have a lot of work to do. So BES's equity manager and our partners in procurement services are looking at ways to improve equity in contracting. I'm actively engaged as the design division manager to see what we can do from a design perspective to get these numbers up. So I think that's the last slide. We have some time to answer any questions at this point.
Actually, this slide is really cool, our question slide. It's a photo from 1921, which is right in the middle of our project area, and where the Cochrane Cider Company is where the Baghdad Theater is now. So anyway, yes, questions, please.
Yeah, that's cool. Any questions, Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Trustee, and was it John? Everything's moving. My screen is moving all over the place. Okay, I'm back.
No worries, it's Joe.
Thank you, Joe, for the presentation. I appreciate you acknowledging that we must do better when it comes to equity goals, because again, even though the totality exceeds our 20% aspiration, we still are not doing the job that we need to do to make sure that we're getting dollars into the hands of minority contractors. So having said that, my question is, expedited, great, people aren't traveling, but didn't the governor just say all retail operations will be open Friday? And if that's the case, what does that mean in regard to this plan?
I had not heard that. You know, we even before COVID, we worked closely with community members and the businesses to make sure that, you know, we can stage construction to minimize impacts. I expect that Landis & Landis will do the same thing should that actually take effect on Friday. Tressie, from a project team perspective, have you looked at any other alternatives to that?
I know that Landis & Landis and PBOT are working closely together to expedite construction in light of reopening businesses, and we are actively engaged and prepared to proceed effectively with an accelerated schedule, knowing that COVID, that the stay-at-home order could be lifted at any time.
Yeah,
So we are prepared. Right.
I'm sorry, it doesn't sound like the stay-at-home order is going to be listed. My concern is if the governor, if the rest of the state interprets the governor's opening retail operations this Friday, if that's the assumption that our retailers will have, then this expedition, based on the fact that there would be no travel or minimal travel, would be a wrong premise, if in fact that is the case and people will be more mobile. So all I'm asking is, have you considered the fact that this is changing by the hour, minute, day, and we just may not, the assumptions that you've used to expedite this just may not hold true?
Absolutely. We are prepared to address this rapidly changing situation, and the project team, which includes members from PBOT and BES and the business owners. Debbie also could chime in here regarding her conversations regarding the business community, but the expedited schedule is the preferred approach, knowing that this is a rapidly changing situation and we're prepared to address it.
Debbie Castleton, Public Involvement for Environmental Services. I've been working very closely with the Hawthorne Boulevard Business Association and the area residents. This has been for the last, I'd say, couple months that we've been talking. I'm working closely with Carla Kingsley at PBOT, who is been doing a lot of community outreach, and I've been piggybacking onto that. This project was part of the Sunnyside South project previously, and we expedited the Hawthorne portion to accommodate the businesses and finish this before the grind and pave or paint and pave project through PBOT was happening. In talking to the Hawthorne Business Association members, they definitely wanted us to expedite this to help prevent chaos when things do open, but they were prepared, and that if they did open before this was done, we would get a significant portion done before it opened. And I have to say also that the businesses, there's a lot of businesses who have curbside, and we're accommodating that and working with the businesses on Hawthorne who are doing a lot of curbside pickup type businesses, but there is definitely a majority that are closed.
There's no doubt that that is a horrible way to travel when you have to go down Hawthorne and rush hour traffic, which used to be all day, every day. So I absolutely know the need for the service. It's just a question about whether or not, I guess my concern is if one business association can advocate for you to speed up the process, what's to stop other business associations from saying they're not being treated equally because you did this for Hawthorne and now you won't do it for somebody else?
We're actually trying to do that for the Mississippi project as well, to expedite. So we're working on that one as well. There's the whole Mississippi Business Association, or Historic Mississippi.
I think there's a balance between expediting and then making sure that we have the diversity and contracting that we want. I'm interested in having these projects done, but I'm not interested in supporting projects that just support the status quo. So I want to be really clear that, you know, any business this district can make the case for why they should be prioritized, but we have an obligation to make sure that our contractors are benefiting from the limited public dollars that we are investing. So thank you.
Thanks.
Very good. Any further questions, colleagues? Carla, is there any public testimony for this item?
There's no public testifiers for this.
Very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you both for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next item is item number 368. This is a second reading. The council's already heard a presentation on this item and has had an opportunity for public testimony. Carla, could you read item 368, please?
Mm-hmm. Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide payment for construction of the Goose Hollow Sewer Rehabilitation Project number E10683 for an estimated cost of $5,949,000.
Very good. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none?
That's correct, and he is waiting.
Very good.
There we go.
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. This is a settlement of James Maddox bodily injury lawsuit for the sum of $22,882.23. On August 4th, 2018, Mr. Maddox was in downtown Portland participating in a protest. As Mr. Maddox walked backwards down Southwest Columbia Street, he was flipping off officers and yelling profanities. He was then struck in the thigh by what he alleges was a rubber bullet, which then fell to the ground. Mr. Maddox picked the rubber bullet up and held it in the air, shouting, "Look, you missed." A Portland Police Bureau officer then fired again, striking Mr. Maddox in the right arm that was holding the bullet. Mr. Maddox sustained a gash in his arm. Mr. Maddox, along with two other protesters, filed a joint lawsuit against the city and the Portland Police Bureau. The lawsuit contained many allegations, including excessive force, violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments, assault, battery, and negligence. He alleged that as a result of the encounter, he sustained injury to his arm, including permanent scarring and emotional distress. He demanded unspecified economic damages, non-economic damages, attorney fees, declaratory relief, and injunctive relief. The parties engaged in informal settlement discussions and were able to reach an agreement for $22,882.23, inclusive of medical expenses, wage loss, and attorney fees. Approval of this ordinance will allow Risk to pay Mr. Maddox through his attorney for the agreed settlement. I also have with me today City Attorney Robert Yamachika, if there's any additional questions for him as well.
Very good. Do we want to take public testimony before questions? And I don't think Commissioner Hardesty has a question at this point. I think she left her hand raised. So we'll start with Mr. Handelman, and if there's other public testimony as well. Dan, are you on?
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. I am Dan Handelman, and I'm with Portland Cop Watch. And I want to start by repeating what we've said in the past about why we feel it's important for the council to discuss these police misconduct settlements publicly. It's not to call out the individual officers, though it is important to note that it's extremely rare that a settled claim results in any discipline for the involved police. It's also not to force a discussion about the harm suffered by the community member, though the end result of putting the items on the consent agenda is an apparent desire not to acknowledge those harms, but we've just heard them described by the city employee who just read them out, and that's, I think, important for the public to hear. The main reason we ask you to put these on the regular agenda is to assure the public that lessons are being learned, and the city and the Bureau are taking steps to avoid such harms in the future, which will not only lead to less harm done, but will also build community trust and save the city money. Portland Cop Watch recently identified $14.2 million paid out in misconduct lawsuits since our group began in 1992. This is an average of $500,000 a year. It's a crucial thing to think about as you're facing these major budget cuts. To the issues underlying this particular claim, several other people filed lawsuits for the use of force by police at the same protest, which I think was just mentioned. It sounds like it was a joint suit, but this claim was settled individually. There were people who were hit by flashbang projectiles that day. Police violence continued at subsequent neo-fascist versus anti-fascist protests in June and August 2019, involving use of pepper spray and pepper balls, as well as several people arrested in questionable circumstances. Many of those people in the August 2019 protests were women or women of color, including a woman who was recently cleared of disorderly conduct charges for twerking in the street. Clearly, the circumstances for mass gatherings has made crowd control less of an issue so far in 2020, but it'd be well worth discussing the potential for police violence if protests do take place, as well as the questionable tactic used, though highly applauded, on August 17th, bringing so many overtime officers and external agencies that there was one police officer to face off with every 2 protesters. That was last August 17th. I'm also hoping that we'll be able to make comments on that, we'll be able to make our comments on the item 369 tomorrow afternoon. It was unexpected that got rescheduled, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. But thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this, for letting me pull it off the agenda, the consent agenda.
Very good. Thank you. Carla, was there anybody else who wanted to testify on this item?
No one else signed up.
Very good. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, this is Deputy City Attorney Rob Yamachika.
Yes,
I'd just like to clarify a couple things just for some transparency. The total amount of the settlement is $22,882.23, $10,000 of which will be going to Mr. Maddox, and $12,882.23 will be for the attorney's fees. And so, as the council might be aware, part of our risk assessment is to minimize attorney fees in this case. And as you can see with this settlement, the attorney's fees actually are more than the settlement amount. And so that came into our calculus in reaching a settlement in this case to minimize attorney fee exposure.
Thank you, Robert. We appreciate it. Good clarification. Carla, please call the roll.
Hardesty.
Thank you. I am always concerned, of course, when we pay out these settlements, but when I also saw the low payout amount and the fact that all parties agreed to mediation, it gave me a sense of comfort that this was the right settlement to move forward. I vote aye.
Daly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. And Carla, that completes our business for this morning, correct?
Yes, that is, Mayor.
Very good, everybody. Thank you all for your participation. We are adjourned until 2 p.m.